The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren, Mr. David Martino. This is supposed to be bad week, sort of.
This is the bad week.
I was supposed to be calling you names. David, bad dressing Martino.
Yeah, there you go.
David.
That's a start.
David Bald Martino.
Well, that's basically true. I can't even make it look like I have hair anymore. I used to be able to angle the camera just right. And no.
So you go into the hairdresser and they say, well, what are you here for?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's been at least 20 years for me. So at least, you know.
I'm too lazy to shave my head though.
Well, yeah. You know, get big curlies and you can wrap it around. You know, get the big sideburns and wrap that around like they used to do in the 60s and stuff.
Yeah. Here we go.
Make it look like you have hair, you know.
Yeah, it'd be perfect. I like it.
Well, you know, anything to make you look better.
That's right. That's right. Thank you.
We've got a writer returning, and he's got a new book coming out or come out. We'll find out. And of course, it's called Velma Gone Awry, and it's a Brooklyn 8 Ballo mystery, and it's Mr. Matt Cost. Thank you for being here, Matt.
Well, thank you for having me on the premier mystery radio show in the world.
Well, of course.
That's right. Yeah.
Who else would we have, you know? And Velma, what part of her went awry?
Most of her except her mind. Her mind knew exactly where she was, but her body, it was floating around Brooklyn in the 1920s.
So was mine. I find this interesting because you write you're writing back in time, but you bring in kind of popular names and you have your characters interact with them or come across them, or, you know, you make it a part of the story. That's kind of interesting. How do you decide who you're going to do? Who you're going to have in there?
You know, it sort of all started off, and, you know, I realized that Brooklyn in the 1920s was one of the more fascinating places in the entire world. And for one of the big reasons for this was the legendary figures that lived in that time period. So as I came across a person that really, you know, just did it for me and said, wow, I want to learn more. I want to go down this rabbit hole and see what I can learn about them. Then, you know, they became part of the book. So some became larger, some that I thought were going to be involved, you know, kind of fell off the wayside a little bit as others became more interesting, but that's the direction I took.
Do you try to stick to the truth with them, or kind of popular opinion of them at the time, or do you use the kind of how people feel about them today?
I absolutely try and keep to who they were. I'm obviously putting them into a fictional book, so, you know, some of their actions are things that they might not have done. And the one that I'm writing that's coming out in 2024, we've got Dorothy Parker in goggles driving an automobile across Gravesend in Brooklyn as, you know, gangsters chase them. So that probably didn't really happen to Dorothy Parker, but I try and keep her dialogue very accurate to that witty, caustic, you know, wit that she was at the time.
So how do you, so that's kind of what you do. You kind of find out what kind of dialogue they used at the time, or how they acted or interacted outside of their profession, and then try to use that?
Outside of their profession, but inside of their profession as well. You know, I mean, you know, again, to use Dorothy Parker, you know, she was a writer for several different magazines, but one of her more famous things is being at the Algonquin Hotel and, you know, the round table that she was one of the primary figures of there. And you might consider that her professional persona as well. So, you know, taking things from that is really who she was, not just who she might be in the privacy of her home.
How do you get into the mind of your historical characters? Do you have to do a lot of research into that, or is that something that's just more imagination?
I'd like to say that I do a lot of research, because that's the correct answer to use as a writer. So, you know, I try and do as much as I can, but I think as writers and whatnot, we all always feel like we could have done more. And, there's other things that we could have done or researched, or I could have read one more book or one more, newspaper article or whatever about these people. But I try and get into their minds.
So what is the idea set behind this book? Like what is it that you're doing in this book? This is not connected to any of your other books, is it?
No, this is the debut of what I hope to be a new mystery series, coming out April 12th. And it will be set in 1923 Brooklyn. And I have a detective named Ballo. I always feel that I have to explain the moniker to start it off. He was the 8th child born to Hungarian parents. He had 4 brothers and 3 sisters. And his mother was so certain that he was going to be a girl child that she had picked out Marguerite as a name for him, but not a male name. So when he surprised her, it came out as a male. Dad was off to sea. She just wrote down on the birth papers 8 to signify that he was the 8th child, and meaning to change that and give him a name later, but she never did. So 8, the numeral 8, Ballo, is our protagonist, who is a PI in 1923 Brooklyn. He's just out of World War I, as is much of America, and trying to find his way. And into the office walks a German businessman who might have some lack of scruples to him. And he wants 8 Ballo to find his flapper daughter, who is 25 years old, who has gone awry. And that sets the story off as 8 Ballo and his group of friends try and track down this flapper, Velma Hartman, who has gone awry and is flitting around Brooklyn and New York City and up into Harlem, and just one step ahead of people, and nobody knows quite why.
What do you think makes a really good mystery, like a mystery story like this?
I think all the pieces are necessary, which would be the setting. So Brooklyn in the 1920s is a fantastic setting, but I think that you really need, bright, colorful characters who are brought to life and aren't just, flaccid and flat on the pages, but, become real people. And of course, then you have to take those characters and have them follow along a plot, a storyline. And for a mystery, I think that you need a twist, you need a turn, or, 2 or 3 or 7 or 8 or maybe 10 twists and turns, just to keep the reader guessing and try and, lead it to a place that nobody expected it to be. But when it gets to that conclusion, everybody says, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, because Velma ended up being a man, right?
Did you read the book? Because I really, I think we're going some spoiler alerts here.
Yeah, that's it. I knew it. It's kind of crazy, but so you also have to put the setting in the 1920s. So you have to kind of have a feel for that time, like the words they used, the slang they used, what police really did back in the 20s, because it's quite a bit different than now.
Absolutely. And you say I had to, but I might say that I got to. And that was an entirely enjoyable piece. There's lots of different ways to research that sort of thing. But I think one of the more, something that's a little unique that I haven't heard of a lot of other people do is I do subscribe to newspapers.com, which archives all the newspapers from, all of time, basically.
Yeah.
So I could read any of the newspapers from 1923 in Brooklyn and New York. I chose to read the Brooklyn Eagle, and I read that every morning for a year. So not just the stories and the articles and what movies were playing, but the advertisements of what kind of hats were being sold and what an automobile costs. And so, I found that getting into that newspaper, I'd read my local newspaper, then I'd move over to the computer and I'd read online newspapers.com, the Brooklyn Eagle, starting January 1st, 1923 through the end of the year. One day at a time, but yeah.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I'm fascinated with how there's a lot of stories that could be written today, different language, but the same sort of complaining and fights that were going on in the 20s were really the same as what they're doing now,
Oh, absolutely. Everybody, I'm a history guy, and people say that history goes in cycles, and it absolutely does. And I think where we are in, 2023 is, a 100-year cycle of 1923. There's a lot of, new change coming about and things happening, but there's also a lot of repression and, pushback on that new change. Again, in the second book in that series, that's one of the things that I'm going to really get deeply into is that press back and repression that's happening to, that flapper lifestyle, which is really what, Velma Gone Awry is about, is the emergence, these different groups, especially women, who said, no, I'm not staying at home anymore. I'm going to go out, I'm going to enjoy life, and I'm going to do my thing, and I don't have to get married and stay at home and raise kids. And, but we're going to hit the pushback on that, just like we're hitting the pushback recently on a lot of things that have emerged in, 2023.
Right. Yeah, because I live the flapper lifestyle.
That's what I heard. Like, things get a little crazy up there in British Columbia.
Oh, a little crazy, wild, swinging from the trees here. I'll tell you, they stay away from me. Do you think about how you're going to write violence and sex in this book? Like, is it conscious to you, or do you avoid it?
I'm trying to be careful with it, but I think it's a reality of life is violence and sex and foul language. And, you can't avoid these things. I try and be as authentic and real as I can. As a matter of fact, this Velma Gone Awry just got a review in Indie Tale magazine, which is a bit of a romance, mystery, suspense, sci-fi magazine. And one of the things they do is they give a rating, but then they also give a tea kettle rating for steaminess. And the most you can get is 5 tea kettles. And Velma got 5 tea kettles. And I kind of been saying to people that I know, really? I don't think it's that steamy. And everybody's going, yeah, it is.
Well, I guess it depends on what you're doing outside of the book life. Are you living a flapper life?
No, I don't live too much of a flapper life up here in Maine. New England, I guess David's in New England with me as well, but we're just trying to survive the winter right now.
Exactly.
Oh, it's not sunny and warm?
Cloudy, freezing rain, and 32, but it's close to sunny and warm.
Wow. God, you guys are worse off than I am. What's going on?
It's a little better here near Boston, but...
I find this fascinating sort of idea. So you're already doing book 2, but I'm thinking, how are you... So you kind of know ahead of time what you want to do in the next book?
I wouldn't say that I typically know what I'm going to do in the next book before the last book is done. I'm currently writing 3 different series and standalone as well. After completing Velma Gone Awry, which was a little bit more than a year ago that I completed it as it goes on its publication route. Since then, I've written 2 books in my other series, mainly Wicked, the 5th in my mainly mystery series coming out in August, and Pirate Trap, the 5th book in my Clay Wolf Trap series coming out in December. And I finished and at that point I got back to writing the sequel to this, which is going to be called City Gone Askew and will be due out in April of 2024.
Well, how do you organize your series? How do you keep your continuity? Do you have a series Bible? Do you use other tools to keep track of everything, or are you able to kind of keep track of everything in your head?
It's a series Bible, I guess, is the closest. I wouldn't call it a Bible. I shy away from having a Bible, but I do have an outline that I keep of each book. And that outline sometimes is what I'm going to write, and sometimes it's what I have written. So at the completion of having written a book, I do have an outline that I can always refer back to, and it helps me when writing that book. But then it helps me, when I need to check details from future books to make sure that, this character really does have, one blue eye and one green eye.
Yeah. You're a wolf trap. You have to be careful. Is it, you were saying that, commenting on Connor O'Sullivan's, is it as good as my wolf trap? Are you kidding? I'm not going to say a thing. That guy lives in Montana and goes out and rips a bear apart and eats it. So, no, I can't. I'm not saying anything. He's
I have to say that that's the first time I've got radio silence from you ever.
Well, because it scared me even talking to him on Zoom. I was worried. I'll tell you. No, he's a savage. Good writer, but no, I'm not touching that. Not touching that one. He'll come hunt me down. And my dog, too.
Well, I'm glad that you messaged me privately and told me that mine was much better than his.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. It's time to move,
Yeah.
Since Al's gone awry, he has to move out into the sticks. Hide.
Just give him my address like you do everybody else.
Well, this is true. That might work.
David would probably be safe with it with all the martial arts training that he does, right?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe.
I don't know. He's pretty big.
Yeah.
I don't know. A young Arnold,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know. I'm staying away from that one. So, listen, you guys in Maine are pretty, you guys are kind of pretty close, you writers up in Maine. I noticed you guys really stick together, stick out for each other. What do you think it is about Maine that does that?
2 months of summer and 10 months of winter, probably. We have a hard time getting across the borders. But no, seriously, I'm not really sure, but I would have to agree with you that the writing community is fantastic up here in Maine, whether it be the publishing or the writers or the readers that support these writers. It's pretty fantastic. So it's been nice.
Yeah, I haven't seen that kind of an effort, or it's just the way I see it. Anytime, that's how you can know Maine writers, because it doesn't matter if they're in the same genre or not. They just all sort of stick up for each other, which I don't quite get the same feeling in other areas as I see in Maine. Maine is just like, unless you guys are all working in the same house and all writing, just using different names.
Yeah, we're actually all Stephen King, just using pen names.
I thought so. See, now we're going to find out some real dirt here. Yeah. But who do you use instead of Stephen King for your image?
Models, male models that are pulled from agencies. So that's, both the images that David and I have right now are probably been taken from those male model images.
Yes.
Must have been pretty old models. Models from the 70s. It's kind of like a retro models. You can get them cheaper that way.
Exactly.
How do you end a series? Like, I've never done a series like this where you have characters and you're running through and stuff. How do you know when it's over, or how do you decide?
I will have to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know how I end a series because I haven't yet. I have 5 books in my mainly mystery series and 5 in my Clay Wolf series. And I've been tentatively thinking that 6 is going to be the number. So I guess if you were to have me back next year or the year after, Al, I would be able to answer that. But I haven't figured it out yet. I'm wondering if I kill somebody or, what do I do?
Yeah, I always wonder about that. And if you do kill them, like what makes you feel it's time to kill them? Like, what is it that you just go, I'm tired of this guy. I'm tired of this character. I'm tired of whatever. And then you just go, that's over. I always wonder about that.
Yeah, it's sort of two different things. I mean, if I were to kill the protagonist, that would be to end the series. I did just write an article for a magazine, I forget which one, on, how to kill or not to kill. Every once in a while in my series, I sort of feel like, okay, we got to make this real. Because if all the good guys always walk out at the end and everybody's high-fiving and, slapping hands and bumping elbows, then there's no real stakes for the reader. They know that it's going to end up all okay. So every once in a while in a book or in a series, I say, okay, we got to kill somebody likable here. And then we narrow it down and figure it out who it's going to be, and we kill them.
It's savage, So what do you want people to get out of your books? Like in this series here, like is this, do you have any meaning to this book?
It didn't really start out to be anything more than an appreciation of Brooklyn in the 1920s and a good tale that's going to keep you guessing and twisting. But, as these things tend to get to be, you get deeper into them and you realize that, there are deeper issues involved, and some of the good people of the time might not have been all that good, and some of the bad might not have been all that bad. And, certainly again, into the second book that I'm writing now, I start to go deep into the entire eugenics movement, the KKK, and their associations with Nazis. So it always, gets a little heavier as I progress, I think.
I guess you have to be pretty sensitive to how you write that or how you present it these days.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a delicate dance writing authentic history, as you do a little more nonfiction, I guess, but writing authentic fiction of a historical time period without offending today's political sensibilities, that realizes how wrong some of the mannerisms and actions and verbiage was. And, you want to showcase that some of the antagonists, the bad people, the baddies, the villains, did act in this manner, but you don't want to offend today's readers by doing that. So that is a very delicate dance.
Yeah, I frankly, I don't know how you do it, because when you write true crime, even publishers will give me hassles if I use much of the language some of the people actually used, and they'll want to change it. And I'm thinking, well, but this is true. This is what people really were. That's what they said. So how do you change what people say and consider it nonfiction? In fiction, I guess you can do that, but do you really want to make it so soft that they don't understand how bad it really was?
Yeah, no, it's, I have come down in some of my historicals, this one, another book that I wrote, Love in a Time of Hate, set in New Orleans during Reconstruction after the Civil War. And, it was a time of a lot of hate and a lot of anger, and have realized that I have to remove is some of the offensive slang, slurs. And that seems to be universally said. You can't do that, even if the person would have said it that way at that time. But at the same time, it seems like you can get away with that antagonist killing another person because of the color of their skin or their gender or whatever thing offends them. And that's acceptable in the books. But, a slur is not. So I guess you just have to go with the current times and, follow what the trends are.
Yeah, no, I know. I just think it's, I think in a way it's doing it just, it's not serving the people well, because things are what they are, especially back then. They were what they were. People said what they did, and you don't have to go to town with it, but people need to know. Because sometimes I still turn on Turner Classic Movies, and I'll see a movie from the 60s, and their language is crazy in how they behaved, but it's effective. It gives you a feeling of how it really was.
Yeah, well, I hear that they are cleaning up some of these old authors, Agatha Christie books that are being republished. They're removing some language that was in them.
Yeah, I don't know. See, and I'm not sure what I think about that. I guess it is what it is. It's out of my hands, but I don't know. I think sometimes it's never appropriate to be how bad people were to each other. Even today, they're still bad to each other, and it's not appropriate. But I don't know if taking it out of popular press items is really helping it any, because it's still there.
Yeah, when I'm writing, I feel like if I'm showcasing that person as being bad by doing or saying what they're saying, then it should be acceptable. But I found that it isn't necessarily. So, what would be more difficult even is, a lot of people that were supposedly good people at the time were using some of that language, or often cases were using that language. And, it would be even more difficult to show them as a good person using language like that. So it's very difficult.
Yeah. I have that problem writing about Dave, because he's,
because you have a hard time.
Such a bad person.
Hard time saying anything nice about him.
Yeah. Well, he's, who else goes out doing karate in a dress and saying such bad language and listening to heavy metal music? It just doesn't.
All at once.
What kind of a character is that? See, he's unbelievable. Yeah. It's not believable. They don't believe.
No, I've just real. On Facebook videos, I've been learning some martial arts from Dave. So I've been practicing in my living room and, following what he's doing and
breaking lamps.
You think he does good on the videos? You should see the video of him in the buffet. He can carry 3 plates at a time.
That's right.
Yeah.
And roll.
Yeah. He's an animal. So who do you like right now? Who are you reading yourself?
As I get further enmeshed into writing, I find myself reading more and more books by people I know. So currently I'm writing a book by J.B. Manning called the Richter the Mighty. And it's sort of a madcap, political, absurd sort of thing, which is out of my normal genre. I often read mostly mystery, some historical stuff. But it was kind of nice to get a little splash and do something different like that. On the bigger front, I do like the, big names of David Baldacci and Michael Connelly. Sorry.
Never heard of him.
But then I like my, smaller writers, some from my writing groups and some from my publishing houses, people like B.J. Magnani and Kevin St. Jar. I can always go back and read Elmore Leonard books, some of the older Carl Hyacin books, certainly Robert Parker books, genre, that somebody who I think sort of shaped me. And I'm not sure how many people are really doing that genre these days. The sort of the hard-nosed PI with a lot of action and, tough guy sort of things. It's branched out a lot from that, and we're getting a lot of different types of reading, and and I'm enjoying some of that too.
What was your favorite in old mysteries?
I certainly like many of the Robert Parker's The Good Wolf Manuscript and things like that. The Elmore Leonards were good, but if I go old, for me, it would be the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew and Encyclopedia Brown, because they're kind of the ones that whet my appetite for the whole genre, moving forward.
Right. They were from the 1800s, right?
Geez, I think some of that, did the Hardy Boys start like in the 1920s? So, we're back there with Marlowe and some of those people.
So what do you suggest for someone that wants to write a book? What would you tell them to do? Like someone that's writing maybe and They're sitting in their room and they don't know what to do, publish or self-publish or any of this stuff going on because it's a different world now.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's fairly open-ended. I'd started off with, just write, if you want to write a book, you have to write. And, too many people get caught up in, researching for far too long and never pulling, the trigger and, starting the writing process. Or you start writing and you get bogged down into going down those rabbit holes and get away from the writing. I think social media has pulled people away from writing in many instances, and it's just hard for them. I know the pandemic rolled in March of 2020, and I started writing more than ever, but I knew a lot of people who were writing less. And I'm like, you're trapped at home? Why are you writing less? And it was just too much stimuli coming at them. So to block out this stimuli to write is step one so that you can write a book. And then, of course, you have to edit it, 450 times to make sure that it's perfect, because there's nothing people like more than is to find an error in your writing and, hold it up to the spotlight and have everybody, laugh at you. So after you get to that point and you're ready to go to a publisher, it's a tough call out there. I've decided to go. I got published by a small publisher called Encircle Publications, and I've really enjoyed that route because I've got to know the publishers and the people that work there, and they work very closely with me, and we have each other's back, and I've got to know the other authors as well. We have, happy hour nights. Used to be every Thursday night, but now a couple Wednesdays a month, where people get on Zoom from all over the world. And, we have a cocktail and, talk about writing and what's going on with just the authors at my publisher. So I would, that's been a great experience for me, but much like writing is a different experience for every single person, I think publishing probably is too. And some people would rather go self-publish, or it's always nice to get the big publisher. But I've heard a lot of horror stories from the big publisher, if they're not backing you anymore and they're ready to, cut the ties at the first sign of, you losing readership. And so I like very much where I am. So to paraphrase, just write, make it as good as you can, and then follow the route that you think is best for you. For me, it was a small publisher called Encircle Publications.
And you have no problem just sitting down and writing. Like it doesn't matter what's going on outside your door, I guess.
No, I actually write in my living room, and I've done that while my kids were growing up. I've done that, and I still do that now that they've moved out and it's a little quieter, but there's 3 dogs that are often, poking me in the back or barking at a delivery. I put headphones on and I sit in the corner of the living room and I play soft jazz music because there's no lyrics and things like that to distract me, and I go into my own world, and that's very effective for me.
Wow. I got to have a couple of TVs going and the music going and the dogs barking, and then I feel like writing.
You like your distractions.
I like the anxiety, knowing that I've got things I've got to do. So, and then I'm sitting and I have to write, but I have things, and it's like stress. Feels good.
Did you find yourself pulling your hair out at any point?
Yeah, that's why I don't have any. Yeah. That happened back in the 90s. God, that's terrible. I had that picture of me from the 90s, and that woman that says, "Oh, the hair's still the same." Man, how harsh is that? Wow, what a nice lady. Delete. Delete block. No, not that bad. Not that bad. So are you doing more shows now? Are you getting out there? You seeing the world? Seeing people?
Yeah. I am some. I've got some different library gigs lined up and some bookstore gigs lined up. with the release of Velma Gone Awry coming out. One of, I guess, two of the events that I'm looking forward to most is the book launch celebration of Velma Gone Awry, which I'm going to hold at my local golf course. And hopefully the weather will be good enough that we'll be outside on the deck and maybe some music playing, and I'll have my friends and family come, and maybe some strangers in the wild will show up, and we'll have some drinks and some appetizers and, talk about books and, or talk about golf or talk about something else. So I'm looking forward to that one very much. And then I've got another gig coming up in a couple weeks that is a mystery making gig at a library where myself and two other authors will be on a panel, and people from the audience will give us different clues, like, names of people and murder weapons and things like that. And with their help, we will construct a mystery around that. And that sounds like it would be a good time. So those are two of the top ones I'm looking forward to right now.
Boy, you're like Lady Gaga. You got all these big things going on.
People always say that me and Lady Gaga are like two peas in a pod.
I was going to say, well, because you look a lot like her. Actually, she looks like you because you're older than her. So she's copying you.
Yes. Yeah, she's a poser.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, we know you're the real one. Well, so those events really help, don't they? Like, where do you get out of those events?
I think you certainly get promotion and publicity. For if 20 people show up at the library, that probably means that a couple hundred people saw the promotion and publicity and have considered your book at that point. They just didn't want to bother coming to see you at that particular day for whatever reason, maybe.
Because they've met you before.
But even bigger than that, I think, is I sit behind my desk every day writing, and I sit at a computer, and I don't get out into the real world. So I really enjoy actually going to do events, whether it be a reading or a talk or a mystery making panel or any of these other things, just to interact with people and talk about books and, more importantly, about my book. So, I'm the center of attention, so it feels good.
Do you think that being out there with people and having conversations, do you think that it helps you to write dialogue better? Kind of refills the well by having conversation?
I'm not sure that is the case. Certainly not writing the 1920s. I think the dialogue's very different than that.
Well, certainly the people that go out to see him aren't going to be.
And my mainly mysteries, I tend to have a sort of a more blue collar crowd in my books than attend library events. So I'm not sure the dialogue really corresponds.
It's back to the sensitivity. Too much swearing. Oh, that's terrible. But it's good. It's a good thing to do. It's good to get out there and do that sort of stuff. I just don't do that. But I don't like people. People don't like me. So
I find that hard to believe.
It's true. They line up to call me names, throw stuff at me.
Well, they like to call you names.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, it's fun for a while.
Everybody has a role to fulfill.
Exactly. I understand what mine is totally. So what's next for you? How many are you doing a year? How many books can you write in a year?
I seem to be on a trend to do 3 a year. As I sort of briefly mentioned to you that, April 12th, which may be today, is the release of Velma Gone Awry. And then in August, I will have mainly Wicked, the 5th in my mainly mystery series, come out. And in December, I will have Pirate Trap, the 5th in my Clay Wolf Trap series, come out. And off to the publisher already is the sequel to Velma Gone Awry, which is going to be called, unless they change it, City Gone Askew. And I'm currently writing something new that might be a standalone, might not be, about halfway through, and I'm at that point that I don't really know what it is. Uh, it's sort of a modern day Robin Hood. So we'll see where that goes, and hopefully it'll all come together and make sense to me before the ending, and I'll be able to send that off to the publisher as well.
How do you know when your book's done? Like, is there a certain point that you're done, you're finished? Like, how many times do you keep going over it?
Oh, for editing, I've sort of fallen into a routine that I do 3 edits myself, which I'm not sure how much good that does, because I'm not sure that I'm much of an editor, but, I try and do 3 edits myself to clean it up, like getting ready for the housekeeper. And then I have an editor that I pay to do 3 more edits on it. And that's all before it goes to the publisher, where they will do 3 more edits on it. So by the time it's all done and told, there'll be 9 edits on average of my books. Wow. I know that, I think it was last year, or whenever there was one point where I was listening to Dean Koontz on your show, and he was talking about his editing process, and I believe he was saying that he, would not go on to the next page until one page was perfect. And, so by the time his book was done, he didn't need to do any edits. And he was saying something to that effect. And, I was listening to your show, and I stopped and I thought about that. And then I just shook my head and said, what does Dean Koontz know?
Right. I know. He's barely got a book out.
I mean, 450 million copies sold. He doesn't know anything.
No, but but he doesn't tell you those copies. He buys.
Oh,
okay. This is not real people out there buying it. He's all.
But I guess that's just.
He's all show.
That goes to showcase, that I think everybody's writing style is different. So that you'd kind of asked me before on advice, but my advice is just write and don't try and copy somebody else. And, there's a lot of people that read, how to write a book, manuals, whether it's Stephen King or Anne Lamott, it's different for everybody. And, you've got to find your style and your inner voice and, say what you want. And that's going to be effective for you. And if there's enough people that are as strange as you are that like what you write, then you'll do well financially. But if not, you won't. But at least you'll have written what you wanted to write.
There you go. Says it all. So where do people find you on social media and website and restaurants, bars? Where do people find you?
At bars, it's usually front and center. Restaurants, I like a darker corner. But my website is www.mattcost.net. Facebook, I can be found under, Matthew Cost, as I can on Instagram. Those are places, certainly the easiest is my website, and then you can link to everything else, including my email and phone number. I haven't gotten big enough to have to hide my phone number yet, so I occasionally get the phone calls from fans who, tell me how much they love my books, and that's always appreciated. And I haven't really gotten anybody that called or has emailed me to say how much they hate me. So far we're doing okay.
Yeah. Well, let's try and get that changed. Let's try to get some action here. Okay. Let's get some people. Send them all hate mail. Find a mistake in his book and let him know.
It's the 2 of you that I'm most concerned about out there.
No. Us?
Some, really sharp criticism signed, "This is not Al Warren."
Yes, that's right. That's right. I don't waste my time with that. But anyway. Well, of course, we'll have everything up for people to find you and hunt you down like the animal you are. And, well, let's see. Now, the new book, Velma Gone Awry. This is by award-winning author. Not just an author, he's award-winning, Mr. Matt Cost. So thank you for being here.
Well, again, thank you very much for having me on the show. Your show is fantastic, and it's a proud moment for me to be here.
Thanks, Matt.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.